So, thanks for inviting me. I've been here as a speaker and also moderator before. It's nice to be back here on Medicinaberget. I will be, in the next 15 minutes or so, sharing my experiences on how to navigate the sometimes quite a bumpy road. We came to Greece sometimes, but in some matters you also need to understand what happens for the investors, the 5 we have in here, in their mind. If you burn all the money in Copenhagen, they won't be able to give you some money to go to Paris and Brussels later on. So, starting with the end in mind, there are a lot of questions that you need to ask yourself when you start. First, you need to see what are the unmet needs and how can our product, service, technology meet those unmet needs. What other competitors are out there? Will we see any potential disruptive technologies coming our way that can replace our technology or product? All those questions you need to start to ask yourself. If you have all the questions from the start, you have probably not asked the right questions. So, who am I then to take 15 minutes of your life to share this? I have spent more than 20 years in life science in both medtech and pharma. I've been in global companies all the time, working from CD nomination to mature brands. I have been working with virtual startup companies. I've been in board of directors, and I'm still. And it's a journey, and all journeys have their different pitfalls. And I will share some of the experiences in that journey that I have done. So, there are a smorgasbord, one of the 2 words in Swedish that exist in the English dictionary, that you can take from. And you understand, 15 minutes, I can't do any deep dive on that. So I'll try to do as Jamie said. I'll give you some experiences, and hopefully I can share some of the pitfalls that I have managed to avoid, but also some experience where I have wanted to do something else if I would have known before. Regardless of where you start, you need to start with a need. I have seen so many projects and so many innovators that have this cool technology, they have something which is just fantastic. But you need to start to see, is there a need for this? Who are the patients in the end? Who is the end customer? And are they prepared to pay for this? Because you can have the coolest technology, but if no one wants it, it's not so cool. So start with the needs, then you need to discuss and realize, okay, what are we trying to achieve with this? After that, you can do, which is one of not my best things, but I have to do it, plan. I'm a doer, but you need to plan with the end in mind. It will save you time in the end. So start with the need, then you look at what are we trying to achieve, then decide what is the scope, because it's so easy to try to do everything, and doing everything will take you more time, it will cost more money. Then when you have decided that, then you can do the plan. So let's start with the centerpiece here, the team and a shared agenda. When Jamie was out interrailing, he probably had a nice piece of team around him, a group of people that he wanted to travel with. If you're alone, that's one thing, but you usually have a team. You need to be aware if all of you have the same shared agenda. So, how much time is each person willing to spend working for the company? This is going to be day and night. It's not going to be any free lunches. You might create families during this time. How much time can then each people spend? Is it okay to have their parallel assignments or not? How do we split the ownership? And later on, when we come to financing, how much are we prepared to share of that ownership? It's still, the penny hasn't dropped in some places where you think it's better to own 70% of a company worth 1 million versus owning 10% of something worth 1 billion. That's a difference. So you need to decide that upfront. And also, what type of risk aversion or risk profile do we have in this team? What risks are we prepared to take? Some of the team members might think that this is a journey to Greece for 5 years. Others might be prepared to do it for 20. And still some others want to maybe do it for a year. You need to be aligned. Which journey, which bus are we on? In many cases, it's the nice drinks in Greece, which is the end result. doing something nice, being financially independent. But you also need to be aligned on when are we planning to exit? What should the valuation be of the company? And what is the timing? So when we have that shared agenda, the shared goal, which is the most important, you need to ask yourself, okay, what competences do we have in this team? What do we have currently? What will we need in the future in the different phases? If you plan to grow globally, then you need to have that plan in mind. What type of competence will you need throughout this journey? You also need to decide, is it competences that we need to hire to have in the company, or can we use consultants? There are a lot of different hubs here and elsewhere. So one way to both get competence, but as well as money, is to co-develop. So who can be our partners in this journey, both to speed up things, but also to ensure that we have the right knowledge there. When you are in an early phase, you usually don't have a lot of money. And the money you have, you don't want to spend at fancy hotel rooms or offices or going in the wrong direction. So you need to also consider, how can we compensate the right staff with the right experience in this early phase? Can we give them equity? Can we have any options program? How can we make sure that we get the right competencies? Also make sure that you check what type of other resources do we have in our network. Any mentors that can give us advice, any scientific advisors, and when you do so, don't only check in Sweden, in your closest area, because if your aim is to go global, then you need to talk to people globally. The needs here are not the same as the needs in the US or China or in other places. So make sure that you surround yourself with people that have the knowledge that is required now. The regulatory landscape that I will come to in a few minutes, that is changing. So just because you have been in the industry for many years like I have, if you haven't been there recently, then your knowledge might be outdated. So regulatory, and this for a lot of people is like, oh, this is just some things that is just something which is done by the guys over there. But this is an area which is evolving a lot, and I would presume that there are more medtech companies in here, in the scale-ups or startups, than there are pharma companies. But the requirements are approaching pharma standards also in medtech, and it's tougher and tougher, and there will be more requirements. So make sure that you surround yourself and ask the regulatory experts early, because the regulatory requirements, when you have decided where to launch and where to sell this product eventually, that will guide the whole development plan. And it's not cheap to go back and start validations and collect data afterwards. So do it right from the start. You also need to, when you talk about the needs, as I started off with, you need to look at what are the regulatory needs versus what are the marketing needs. Those are not always the same. So what is required to get this product approved in Europe or in the US or elsewhere, versus what type of claims do we want to make to sell this from a marketing perspective? That's not the same. So some markets around the world do not require regulatory approval. So how can we get money? How can we get cash flow early? Time to market, time is money. It's something that you say, but it's very, very true. So early on, access, what type of different scenarios do we have to get money in early? Can we do some parallel tracks and take some risks? Again, back to the risk profile. What do the team have aligned objectives? What time dependencies do we have? I mean, I work in Vitrolife. We have generated a whole Gothenburg of babies since we started in 1994. But even if you have two mothers, it takes 9 months to get a baby. It's the same with a lot of the projects. So there are some time dependencies, and there are some bottlenecks. What corners can we cut without violating any standards? If we get more money or get more staff, will that make us quicker? Or is it still going to take the same time? Can we co-develop, as I mentioned before? Can we sell this product in markets where there is no regulatory requirement, to use those markets as test beds and then generate data that we can utilize to sell or to get regulatory approval in other markets? In some, if you are lucky enough to work with something unique where you're meeting the needs for an orphan disease, where the needs are very high, then you might be able to sell through compassionate use to make sure that you get access to the patients. They get access to your technology, your drug, earlier than it's regulatory approved. So all these things is worth considering to get the cash flow early and start to get away from the red numbers as soon as you can. So when navigating this then, going back to something which I think is on the forefront and make people not sleep so well all the time, financing. And when I spoke to Jamie, he said, you need to explain wise capital. So not just getting money in, but you want to get the knowledge with that money to ensure that the investors that you have can also bring you something more than just money. So you need to consider which source of money are we financing with. Seed funding, also ensure that you balance the administrative time it will take to show the worth of what you have done since you got the money. It takes quite a lot of time. Business angels, angels is a nice word, but they do want to have return on investment. You need to ensure that you are aware of what is their investment horizon. It takes a lot of time to develop both pharmaceutical drugs, but also some medtech products. Make sure that you are aligned so you don't get surprised in the end. If you are planning of exiting, consider how many owners are you having, because you need to get the majority for a decision. And if you have too much spread and many small owners, that can be difficult. So patents, I will not dwell on this too much. There are a lot of patent firms here and there are a lot of patent experts that you should consult. Make sure that you know where to get patents, where to sell this. But the most important information here that I want you to take away as a startup or scale up is don't forget when the patent cost kicks in, they will cost a lot of money. And you won't be able to use your research funds for patent cost. So instead of putting your houses on mortgages for patent cost, make sure that you take height for this when you look at your financing needs early from the start. Maybe you don't need a patent overall. If it's a short product life cycle, then just go and think, is there any other uniqueness that can protect your product in a different way? Production. Most people in here would say, that's quite boring. I don't need to consider that now. But one of the things that Jamie showed you was production of prototypes. That was what Johannes said was important. It is, because you need to know from the start, where can we produce the prototypes? This can halt your development. This can be a stop, a no-go if you want to sell this. Because if you can't scale up to something which can be commercialized, then it's very tough. So, and also you want to make sure that there is a good margin. So the raw material, the cost of the components that you choose for your device is very important to assess early. And if you're going for a regulatory approval to sell this in the end, you need to understand, you need to know which is the final producing agent that will do this. Because if you change the production site after regulatory approval, you need to get the regulatory approval again. So you need, again, to start with the end in mind and think about that. And if you want to produce in a low-cost country, there will be risk for copies regardless of patents, because you are never stronger than the larger company that have a strong balance sheet. They will fight you and they will do copies. Exit. If you don't plan to commercialize it yourself, you need to dress the bride. Decide in the team, when are we going to exit? When is a suitable timing? What expectations do we have? Make sure that you have a database for the data room early. That takes a lot of time to create afterwards. Make sure that you start from the beginning, not only with the end customer, but who could be a taker for this. And make sure that you collaborate and have an ongoing dialogue with them all the way from the start. Get professional help from an M&A firm. And not the least, make sure that you have enough money to last a long exit process, because the attorney costs and the M&A cost, they will cost, and they tend to increase a lot in the end. So, and you don't want to get another investment round in the middle of an exit process. So, there are risks all the way through. And you need to do continuous risk assessment. You need to look at the market. What has changed? So what is the market feasibility? What's the willingness to pay? Are we able to meet the target product profile that we set up? Are we able to keep a focused scope? The regulatory risks, are the requirements changing? If you plan to sell to a US company in the end, don't put your footprint with FDA. It's fine to get scientific advice from Läkemedelsverket or EMA, but FDA, whatever you agree with them, will affect you in the exit process later on. And then production. Is it possible to scale up, etc.? This is an iterative process. So, some key deliverables and key facts and key takeaways I hope that you have been able to get from these few 15 minutes is that make sure that you dare to try fast and fail fast, because otherwise you might burn so much money and that will affect your evaluation later on as well. So try in simple prototype, see if it flies, otherwise do something else. And it's difficult to kill your own darlings. Ensure that your team, that's the center of everything, is aligned on the expectations. The team is often more important than the product per se, because the investors, they will look at the team, the takers will look at the team to see if you're credible enough. Ensure that the investors are long-term and also that they have knowledge. Surround yourself with a valid advisor network that can help you. And not the least, work with partners your own size. There are a lot of smaller firms out here. Talk to them, because it's better to have scientific suppliers and other suppliers that are your own size, because then you matter as much to them as you do for them. So those are some of the learnings that I've had through the years. And 15 minutes is a very short time to share everything. If you want to get in touch and discuss and learn more, these are my contact details. So please feel free to do so.
Thank you very much.